Conditions at the airfield are becoming more chaotic.
U-52 kam. Wir sollten
The Junkers 52 arrived.
ins Flugzeug gebracht werden.
We should have been loaded into the aircraft by medics. But here's what happened instead. 4 high-ranking officers turned up, well-fed, in white fur coats, each of them carrying a machine pistol, saying that they were acting on the Führer's orders, and that we'd have to miss out. The doctor on the plane told them that it was reserved for wounded evacuees, but they kicked him off. I saw it with my own eyes. Yes, they were laughing at us. They got on that aircraft and forced the pilot to fly them out, without taking a single wounded soldier with them. That's the truth.
Only a few will escape the coming inferno.
Then suddenly, people started charging toward that plane over the snow. Wounded, non-wounded, and what have you. The brutality was unsurpassed. You see, there was only one escape route left. No crew members were willing to leave the aircraft, and they wouldn't be taken off it if there was no other way out of the situation. The pilot would rev up and taxi the plane away. Indescribable scenes were being played out back there. It was completely chaotic. They were pushing the wounded in, pushing more and more of them in. There were plenty of them lying about already. And to make it worse, the Russians were shelling the airfield. Pilot said, "I've got to get going." He taxied down the runway, but the aircraft wouldn't leave the ground. There were soldiers hanging on all over the plane, right and left, especially on the undercarriage. Those who could manage to cling. There was nothing for it but to make the plane swerve from side to side until they were all shaken off. They had to start again. And that was the most terrible moment. I can never forget the noise the starter motors were making. Boom, 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 until the engines caught and ran smoothly so the plane could take off. That's when I passed out. Then the pilot took the aircraft up high, maybe as high as 2,000 meters. And then we broke through the cloud cover. And it was such a wonder for me to be out in the sunlight. Suddenly, it was all brightness. I began to feel that my life had been given back to me. You can hardly imagine what it was like. And I still cannot grasp the reality. Things were so different. After cold and hunger and misery, bullets and shells, and the screams of wounded men, suddenly, there you are in a nice warm bed, with food to eat. And when a nurse first came to feed me my soup from a tin bowl, I cried without any embarrassment. I was carried onto a train for the wounded, which was headed not for home, but for Poland. Hitler wanted to keep the wounded soldiers out of Germany. We were undernourished, you see, and that didn't look so good. So then, I ended up in a military hospital in Zakopane. I only came back to Germany some months later, to the eye clinic at Halle, where Professor Dr. Klause operated on me and removed shell splinters from my cheek. They were embedded in my cheek, but it was only after 30 months that I came home to Germany on leave.
In wintry Germany, the fate of the Sixth Army is largely unknown. The propaganda machine makes the situation seem less serious than it actually is, and news reports refer only to heavy fighting along the Volga. By now, many people no longer place any trust in the official bulletins.
We had no idea that the Germans were surrounded. And in January, at the end of January, I did what could have got me into serious trouble. I tuned into the BBC from England. I heard do-do-do-do, do-do-do-do, the notes from Beethoven's Fifth. I heard them saying, "This is England, this is England. The Sixth Army in Stalingrad has been left to its fate." It was terrible. I sank onto a chair and thought to myself, I can't understand it. You know, who can grasp a thing like that? It was so shattering.
I love you so much that I cannot forbid you to find another man, since you are much too young to spend the rest of your life alone. With all my heart, I hope that you'll be able to find another man to bring you luck and happiness, just as I tried to do. In my final moments, I am grateful as I think back to the day I first got to know you.
That farewell letter from Stalingrad will never reach the woman who was waiting for it.
Angst.
There was a fear, a general fear that everyone had, including me. We were all afraid that the Russians would take no prisoners, that the Russians would shoot all of us. I couldn't bring myself to commit suicide. I said to myself, I'm far too young for that sort of thing at 22. Yes, you have to say that it would have been a crime to kill yourself. And the lieutenant of the first section ordered us to save the last bullet for ourselves. Later, as a prisoner, I bumped into this gentleman, and if I hadn't been in such a weakened state, I would have most likely given him a clout.
In the final days of January, the Red Army cuts the Kessel into two small pockets. The German commanders continue to follow Hitler's orders and fight on.
I didn't see them as fascists, but I took a certain pleasure in their plight. Serves you right, I thought. That's how we felt at the time.
General Paulus and his staff take refuge in the basement of a department store. Although it makes little sense to fight on, only a few high-ranking officers are in favor of laying down their arms. One of these men struggles to get into the headquarters, Captain Gerhard Dengler.
First of all, I nearly passed out from the reek of cigar smoke, brandy, and cooked meat. Then I was angry, and the thought occurred to me that we were out there eating human flesh, while in headquarters they still had meat to grill. They can still get luxuries such as brandy, and they have nice food to eat. And I said, why shouldn't we capitulate? Paulus answered me. He said, you've got it easy, Captain. All you have to do is look for the enemy and the whites of their eyes. But here in the 6th Army headquarters, I've got to make highly strategic decisions. I didn't understand him at all. I simply took it as a cowardly excuse and began to lose my temper. Paulus noticed that I was angry and suddenly remarked, "Yes, Herr Captain. Now that the moment of truth is upon us, the initiative has passed over to the officers in the field." At first I swallowed it, but then I began to get angry again. I thought to myself, here are 20 generals sitting on their thumbs, all of them too scared to surrender. But they're telling me, a low-ranking captain, to take the initiative, implying that if I take the risk and surrender, then I'll have to face the consequences. And if Hitler has you shot later on for showing initiative, that's just tough luck. I was thinking, if you've got full powers to capitulate, then that's what you should do.
Only a few officers come to the same conclusion. The majority feel that they must cling to their duty and honor.
Honor is a bond, and anyone who betrays his honor is a traitor to the fatherland, who would be condemned to death in absentia. And that includes officers and generals. Yes, it was important to the officers. With Paulus, for example, his glory as a general and his respect in the eyes of the German people would have been destroyed if he had surrendered. But the ordinary soldier said, "To hell with their honor."
It is the 30th of January, the 10th anniversary of the Nazi regime. In a broadcast speech, Hermann Göring describes defeat in terms of heroism.
And in the end, although this may sound harsh, it matters little whether soldiers fall and die in Stalingrad, in the North African desert, or icy Norway. If they achieve greatness by offering themselves as a sacrifice, it is so that their people may live.
The soldiers in Stalingrad are listening to their own funeral oration.
And that's when I lost my temper completely. And not just for myself. It was for all of us. According to what he said, all of us were dead, as if the last officer had been blown to smithereens with all his men. But there were still many thousands of us when he told that infamous lie to all our wives and children.
The 2nd of February, and the battle is over, as 100,000 men lay down their arms. Paulus is among them. Just before the end, Hitler promotes him to the rank of Field Marshal, an unmistakable hint that he should take his own life. But Paulus, who was once a warrior and a leader, is now a spineless weakling. No German Field Marshal has ever been taken alive by the enemy, until now. His defeated troops are held in the pocket for 2.5 months.
After the surrender, we had 2,500 Germans locked up in the cellars. They were full of lice, filthy, and wrapped in blankets. They looked just like scarecrows, and on their feet they wore jackboots, just like cartoon Germans.
The Soviets report that the Sixth Army has been defeated, but according to a secret document produced by Russian military intelligence, more than 10,000 Germans are putting up a bitter resistance. They fear captivity and hide in the sewers of the ruined city.
On the 13th of February, we were all at a movie show. Well, in the open air, of course. As the company was going back to our quarters, some Germans opened fire on us. They'd been hiding for all that time in the ruins. Of course, they were shot. I'm not too sure about this, But I think 2 or 3 of them were wounded, and the rest killed.